She only meant to do the right thing. Return a wallet someone left behind at her diner. But when he opened it and saw the photo inside, he froze. Because the face staring back at him wasn't a stranger. It was the past he thought he'd buried, and the daughter he never knew existed. Some storms destroy what we love. Others bring back what we've been running from. Stay till the end, because this story isn't about what was lost. It's about what was finally found. Hart. Rain had been falling for hours. Steady, cold, endless. The kind of rain that made people hurry home, clutching umbrellas tighter, pretending not to notice the world around them. But Lena Hart wasn't hurrying anywhere. Her shoes were soaked, her thin coat clung to her shoulders, and her stomach growled with the reminder that she'd skipped dinner again. In her hand, she clutched a leather wallet. Expensive, heavy, out of place in her world of bus stops and borrowed umbrellas. She had found it an hour ago in the corner booth of the small diner where she worked double shifts. Inside were platinum cards, crisp bills, and a name embossed in silver. Adrian Cole. She recognized the name instantly. Everyone in the city did. The billionaire philanthropist. The man whose face appeared on magazine covers and charity galas. The man whose company, Cole Industries, owned half the skyline. And yet, right now, his life, or at least a piece of it, was sitting in her trembling hands. Her coworker Jana had peeked over her shoulder when she found it. "You know what I'd do? Keep it. Just one of those cards could pay your rent for a year." Lena had shaken her head immediately. "That's not mine. I can't." Jenna sighed. "You're too good for your own good." Maybe she was. Or maybe she was just tired of being afraid of the wrong choice. She looked down at the wallet again. Neat, precise, untouched. Inside the cash compartment was a folded photograph, edges worn from years of handling. Lena unfolded it carefully. It was an old photo, a young woman smiling at the camera holding a little boy in her arms. The boy's hair was messy, his grin wide and innocent. The woman had the same kind of eyes Lena saw every morning in her mirror. Blue-gray, the kind her mother used to call storm eyes. Lena's breath caught. No, it couldn't be. She flipped the picture over. On the back, in faded ink, were 4 words that stopped her heart cold. "Me and Mom, Adrian." She stared at the writing for a long time, the rain hammering harder outside the diner window. Adrian Cole, the billionaire, the man on every screen. And the same boy from the photo. The same man her mother had once whispered about on the nights when the lights were out and the bills piled up. The man she said she loved once, a lifetime ago, before he disappeared. Lena felt the air leave her lungs. Could it be possible? Could this man, the billionaire whose wallet she held, be the same Adrian her mother had cried over until the end? That night, she made a decision she'd spent years avoiding. She would go to him, return the wallet, and finally ask the question that had haunted her since childhood, the one her mother never got to answer. Why did you leave us? The next morning, Lena stood in the marble lobby of Cole Industries, her thrift store coat dripping onto the pristine floor. The receptionist blinked at her, half pity, half suspicion. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Lena said, clutching the wallet. "But he dropped this." The receptionist frowned. "Mr. Cole doesn't handle personal returns. You can leave it with me." Lena shook her head immediately. "No, I need to give it to him, in person." The woman sighed. clearly used to desperate people showing up with stories. She reached for the phone. "I'll see if he's available." Moments later, security guards approached, polite but firm. Mr. Cole doesn't take unscheduled visits." Lena's heart pounded. "Please, just tell him someone found his wallet." One of them hesitated. "Name?" "Lena Hart." The guard froze, just for a second, as if the name meant something. Then he nodded. "Wait here." Upstairs, in the penthouse office overlooking the city, Adrian Cole stood at the window, hands in his pockets, phone pressed to his ear. He was listening to a board member drone about quarterly losses, numbers that no longer moved him. He'd built an empire, lost his father, buried his mother, and learned long ago that love was the one investment that never paid back. "Sir?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "There's a young woman here. She says she found your wallet." Adrian frowned. "I didn't lose—" He stopped mid-sentence, because on his desk sat a small empty space where his wallet should have been. "Send her in," he said. When the elevator doors opened, Lena stepped out, nervous but steady. Adrian turned from the window, expecting another opportunist. But when their eyes met, the room shifted. The air changed. Something in him froze. Her face, those eyes, that same blue gray. His voice caught. "You!" She held out the wallet. "You dropped this." He took it slowly, his gaze never leaving her. "Where did you find it?" "At the diner on Maple. You must have left it on the counter." He opened the wallet, fingers moving automatically, then stopped when he saw the old photograph sticking out. The same photo. The one he hadn't touched in years. The one he thought was still safe in his private drawer. And as he turned it over, his pulse faltered. "Me and Mom. Adrian." His own handwriting. His own photo. He looked up at her, really looked at her, and whispered, almost to himself, "Impossible."
If you were in her place, and the man who abandoned your family stood right in front of you, would you tell him who you are? Tell us in the comments. And if this story has your heart already, tap heart, like, so we know to bring you more stories just like this one. The office was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. Rain tapped against the glass wall behind Adrian, a soft rhythm that seemed to echo the beat of his heart. Lena stood across the room, uncertain. She had imagined this moment, rehearsed it even, but not like this. Not with him staring at her as if she'd just pulled a ghost out of his past. Adrian's hand trembled slightly as he turned the photo over again. His eyes scanned the faded ink, tracing the words "me and Mom, Adrian," as if reading them might somehow change their meaning. He finally spoke, his voice lower, slower. "Where did you get this picture?" Lena hesitated. I didn't. It was in your wallet." His gaze snapped up. "You looked inside?" Her breath caught. "It fell open. I didn't mean to pry." Adrian exhaled sharply, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You shouldn't have seen this." "I wasn't looking for anything. I wanted to return what wasn't mine." The tension hung heavy between them, but beneath it, something unspoken lingered. Adrian's tone softened. "You work at that diner?" She nodded. "Double shifts, nights mostly." "You're not with a company, or—" She shook her head. "No, just trying to get by." He studied her, the soaked coat, the tired eyes, the quiet strength. Something about her presence unsettled him, not in a bad way, just deeply. Finally, he set the photo down on the desk between them. He asked,
Do you know who that is? Lena's throat tightened. The woman? No. He stared at her for a long moment, searching her face for any sign of recognition. She was my mother, he said softly. Lena blinked. Oh. She died when I was 20, he added, his voice thinning at the edges. I took that picture the day before she passed. I've carried it ever since. I'm sorry, Lena whispered. Adrian gave a short nod, looking past her toward the rain. She used to tell me something. Every storm brings something back, Adrian. I never knew what she meant. Lena looked down at the photo again. Maybe she was right. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? She hesitated. Her heart pounded in her chest. Now or never. My mother, she began carefully, used to talk about someone named Adrian. Said he was smart, ambitious, always chasing more than the world could give him. His eyes flicked up. She said he left when she told him she was pregnant. The air shifted. For the first time, Adrian's mask cracked, his jaw tightening, breath catching just enough to betray what he was feeling. Lena forced herself to keep talking. She said he didn't believe her, that he walked away before she even had the chance to prove he was wrong. Adrian stepped back slightly, gripping the edge of his desk. What was her name? She said quietly. Emily Hart. The name hit him like a punch to the chest. He froze completely still, as if his entire body was trying to stop time. He repeated, Emily. Lena nodded slowly. She died 6 years ago. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the man who ruled boardrooms and controlled markets looked utterly lost. When he opened them again, there were tears he didn't bother to hide. Emily Hart, he murmured. She lived on the east side, didn't she? Near the old train yard? Lena nodded, stunned. You knew. He stopped, struggling to find his voice. I didn't know about you. The words hung between them, heavy and fragile. Lena swallowed hard. So it's true? He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. It's true. The silence that followed was deafening. For a man who could talk investors out of billions, he suddenly had no words. Finally, Lena spoke, her voice breaking. My mother used to sit by the window at night, staring at the city lights. She said one of them belonged to you. Adrian's hand went to his chest, as though to steady something that had cracked inside. Lena continued, I wanted to hate you, but she never let me. She said you weren't cruel, just lost. I didn't understand what she meant until now. Adrian's lips parted, but no sound came out. I spent my whole life wondering why she raised me alone, why she looked so sad every time I asked about my father. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And now I know. Adrian stepped closer, slowly, like he was afraid to frighten her away. Lena, he said softly, I didn't know. If I had, God, if I had... She shook her head. You didn't want to know. He flinched. I was 22. Your mother told me she was pregnant. I thought she wanted money. Everyone did back then. I didn't believe her. I told her to prove it, and she never came back. Lena's eyes filled with tears. So you just... forgot? No, he whispered. I tried to, but forgetting doesn't mean forgiving yourself. For a long time, they stood in silence, a father and daughter, strangers bound by a history neither of them knew how to face. Finally, Adrian moved behind his desk, pulling open a drawer. He reached inside and took out an old envelope, yellowed with time. I kept this, he said quietly, for years. He handed it to her. Inside was a letter, unopened. Lena frowned. What is this? He said. She mailed it to my office, 2 weeks after we last spoke. I couldn't bring myself to open it. By the time I tried, it was too late. I'd lost the address. Lena unfolded it slowly. Her mother's handwriting filled the page, looping, careful, trembling in places. Adrian, I'm writing for no money or apology. I'm writing to tell you the truth. I'm keeping her, our daughter. Her name is Lena. I hope one day you'll want to meet her, but even if you don't, I'll tell her about you, the good parts. Because I loved you once, and maybe part of me always will. The ink smudged near the end, as if from a tear. Lena covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. Adrian looked away, his voice shaking. I never deserved her forgiveness. Or yours. For the first time, Lena saw him, not the billionaire, not the headlines, but the man underneath it all. The man her mother once loved. The man who never stopped carrying the photo of the woman who left because she was the only one who ever saw him for who he was. She folded the letter carefully. I don't know what you expect me to do with this. Nothing, Adrian said quietly. I just wanted you to know the truth. She looked at him. Anger, grief, and something else fighting for space behind her eyes. Truth doesn't fix years of silence. He nodded. I know. Then why tell me now? He hesitated. Because the moment I saw you, I couldn't lie to you. You look too much like her. Lena wiped her cheeks. I don't know what happens next. Adrian took a deep breath. Neither do I. She turned toward the door. I should go. He nodded, his voice barely audible. Will I see you again? She paused, hand on the door, and said softly, That depends on whether you mean it this time. And with that, she walked out, leaving the door open behind her.
The rain had stopped by the time Lena reached home, but the sky still looked heavy, like it hadn't finished crying yet. She shut the door, leaned against it, and finally exhaled. Her fingers were still trembling from holding the letter, the same letter her mother wrote 24 years ago, and that she had only now read. She laid it gently on the kitchen table. The paper was yellowed, the ink slightly faded, but her mother's handwriting, soft loops and graceful lines, was unmistakable. Lena brushed her thumb across the words, her eyes tracing every stroke, as though touching them might bring her mother's voice back. Her name is Lena. Her throat tightened. No one had ever said her name like her mother used to, soft, deliberate, filled with hope. The letter was short, but every line hit like a heartbeat. I hope one day you'll want to meet her. But even if you don't, I'll tell her about you, the good parts. Lena whispered to the empty room. You lied, Mom. You didn't tell me anything. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't anger, it was longing. Her mother had told her, in a way, through the love she'd given, the gentleness she'd carried despite the weight of abandonment. Lena turned the page over, finding something she hadn't noticed before, a faint pencil mark at the bottom corner, half erased. If she ever finds you, Adrian, tell her I never stopped believing you could be the man I fell in love with. Her breath caught. Her mother had never stopped believing in him, even when it broke her heart. Lena sank into the chair, hands shaking. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock. She thought about Adrian, about his face when she said her mother's name, about the way his voice broke when he whispered, I didn't know. And for the first time since she found that wallet, she believed him. The next day, Adrian sat in his office staring out at the skyline he'd built his life around, but the view no longer impressed him. Every success suddenly felt hollow. Every deal, every trophy, every carefully crafted illusion of control, empty. He opened his desk drawer and took out the photograph again. His mother's smile stared back at him, that same unshakable kindness he'd seen in Lena's eyes. He had her eyes, her courage, her fire, and he had failed them both. For the first time in his adult life, Adrian canceled all his meetings. He left the building quietly, without telling his assistant where he was going. By mid-afternoon, he found himself standing on a narrow street lined with modest apartment buildings, the kind of place where people counted their coins before buying groceries. He checked the address Lena had written on the envelope when she filled out her mother's death paperwork, the one from 6 years ago. A small brass mailbox still had the name Hart etched faintly across it. He stood there for a long moment, the sound of distant traffic blending with the faint whistle of the wind. Then he placed a single white envelope into the box. No name, no company letterhead, just one word written neatly on the front: for Lena. That evening, Lena found the envelope when she came home from another long shift. No return address, no clue who had left it, but her name written in careful penmanship. She hesitated before opening it. Her hands felt heavy, as if part of her already knew who it was from. Inside was a short note and another folded photograph. The note read, "Your mother once told me forgiveness is a bridge that takes 2 people to build. I don't expect you to cross it today. I just wanted you to know I'm on my side, waiting." Signed, Adrian. Lena blinked through tears as she unfolded the photo. It was a picture of her mother and Adrian, younger, happier, caught mid-laughter at a fairground, sunlight spilling through their hair. She'd never seen her mother look like that before. On the back, written in faded ink, were 3 words: "Before I knew." Lena pressed the photo against her chest and cried, not because of anger, but because of the strange, impossible mercy that life sometimes gives you when you least expect it. The next few days, small gestures began to appear in her life, quietly, respectfully. The diner's faulty backlight was replaced. The broken door handle to her apartment was fixed. An anonymous donation covered her mother's old hospital balance that had lingered for years. She didn't need to ask who was behind it. Every act was written in the same silent language, regret turned into action. But she wasn't ready to reach out. Not yet. One Sunday, after her shift, Lena walked through the park where her mother used to take her as a child. The rain had left everything glistening, the benches, the leaves, the cobblestones. She sat beneath an old oak tree, the same one where her mother once tied ribbons every year on her birthday, tiny pieces of fabric with handwritten wishes. She reached into her pocket and pulled out one of the old ribbons that she had saved from her mother's belongings, soft pink, frayed at the edges. With trembling hands, she tied it around a low branch. Then she whispered, "I met him, Mom." She broke. "He didn't know. I think you were right about him." She looked up at the sky, pale gray, endless, and smiled through her tears. "I'm not ready yet, but maybe I will be." Later that evening, Adrian received a text. Unknown number. "Lena, thank you for the photo. My mother would have wanted me to see it. Maybe someday we can talk again, not as strangers." He stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Adrian, whenever you're ready, no rush. The bridge isn't going anywhere." That night, Lena dreamed of her mother for the first time in years. In the dream, they were walking through the park together, rain falling softly. Her mother was humming, that same tune she used to hum while cooking dinner. She asked, "Do you forgive him?" Her mother smiled. "Forgiveness isn't about him, sweetheart. It's about freeing yourself.
Then she handed Lena a folded photo, the one of the fairground, and said, "Now it's your turn to build." When Lena woke, there were tears on her cheeks, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. The next morning, she took the bus downtown. It was the same route she'd taken the day she found his wallet, but this time the rain wasn't gray, it was silver, clean, hopeful. When she arrived at Cole Industries, the receptionist looked up in surprise. "Miss Hart?" She smiled faintly. "He's expecting me." A few minutes later, Adrian turned from the window, just as he had that first day, but this time his expression wasn't guarded. It was human, open. Lena stood in the doorway, holding the letter she'd reread a dozen times. "I came to return this, and maybe to start building that bridge." Adrian's eyes glistened. "Then I'll start on my side." They sat in silence for a long while, not as strangers, not quite as family, but as two people finally standing on the same side of the truth. And as the rain began to fall again outside the glass wall, neither of them looked away.
For the first time in years, Adrian Cole didn't start his morning with a meeting. No board calls, no investor briefings, no headlines to chase. He started it with coffee, not from the marble espresso machine in his penthouse, but from the small diner on Maple Street, the same one where Lena worked. He sat in the far corner, near the window, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. It wasn't about the coffee. It was about being close to where she came from, the world he'd walked away from without realizing what he'd left behind. He didn't approach her, not yet. He just watched as she moved between tables, balancing plates and smiles that didn't always reach her eyes. Every once in a while, she'd glance his way. Their eyes would meet, briefly, and then she'd look away, pretending to wipe a counter that didn't need cleaning. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something quieter, a space between resentment and forgiveness, wide enough for two people to start building something new. After closing hours that evening, Lena walked out to find him standing by her bus stop. No bodyguards, no car, just an umbrella and that same quiet expression she was starting to recognize, guilt softened by hope. "You really don't give up, do you?" she asked, pulling her coat tighter. He smiled faintly. "I'm learning not to." She looked at the empty street, rain misting around them. "Why are you here, Adrian?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "Because bridges don't build themselves." Lena sighed, somewhere between exasperation and amusement. "That line's too poetic for a CEO. I've been reading more lately, mostly things that make sense of regret." She didn't respond, and he didn't push her. They stood there for a moment, the silence filled with rain and unspoken words. Then, almost reluctantly, she said, "There's a bus in 15 minutes. If you're still here when it comes, you can walk me to it." He smiled, a small, genuine smile, the first she'd ever seen from him. Oh, wait. And he did. That became their quiet ritual. He'd show up sometimes after her shifts, not to talk, not to fix, but simply to be there. One night, he helped her carry supplies from the storage room. Another, he covered the bill for a couple of regulars when their card was declined, quietly, anonymously. When the diner's boiler broke, she found out later he'd paid for the repair under the name A. Cooper. Each act was small, unspoken, but together they built something larger than apology. They built consistency. Weeks passed. Lena began to notice things about him she hadn't before. The way his eyes softened when he talked about his mother, how he paused before saying anything important, as if weighing every word for truth. One night, after closing, she finally asked, "Why now?"
He looked up from his coffee. Why what? Why come back into my life now after all this time? Adrian leaned back, thinking. When I lost your mother, I told myself I was protecting my future. Turns out, I was just running from my past. He looked down at his hands. Steady, confident, powerful. The hands that had signed million-dollar contracts but never once held his daughter's hands. I thought success would fill the silence, he said softly. It didn't. She studied him. And what about now? What do you want? He looked up, his gaze steady. To earn the right to be in your story, he said simply. She didn't reply, but something in her expression shifted, just slightly. A few days later, Lena got a call. Ms. Hart, this is from the community education program. Someone anonymously funded a scholarship for our adult night classes. You've been selected. She heart-skipped. I didn't apply. There's a note, she said. It just says, it's time to start writing your own chapter. She smiled, despite herself. That night she texted him. So, Mr. Anonymous, business or charity? A minute later his reply came. Neither. Just belief. In what? In you. Weeks turned into months. The bitterness that once filled their conversations began to fade, replaced by moments of awkward laughter, quiet understanding, and shared silences that no longer felt heavy. They met sometimes at the park, her favorite bench under the oak tree where the ribbons still fluttered in the breeze. She told him stories about her mother, how she used to sing in the kitchen, how she collected secondhand books, how she always found light in the smallest corners of life. And Adrian listened, not like a man trying to make amends, but like a man learning to remember. One evening, as the sun sank behind the skyline, Lena asked, "Do you ever think about what might have been if you'd stayed?" Adrian nodded slowly. Every day. She watched the river shimmer under the last light. "Do you regret it?" He hesitated. "Regret is easy. What I live with is the cost." She looked at him. "And what do you think that cost was?" He met her gaze, eyes heavy with truth. "Missing every version of you I never got to know." That night, he drove her home, no chauffeur, no pretense, just a quiet car and the hum of rain against the windshield. When they reached her building, Lena turned to him and said softly, "I don't hate you, Adrian." He froze. "I wanted to. For years I thought I did. But I realized something. Hating you means I'd have to hold on to you. And I'm tired of carrying ghosts." Adrian swallowed hard. "Then what does that mean?" "It means..." She took a deep breath. "Maybe I'm ready to forgive you. Not for your sake. For mine." His voice cracked when he spoke. "That's more than I deserve." She smiled faintly. "You're right. But sometimes we give what people don't deserve because that's how we finally heal." The next day, Lena stood on the balcony of her small apartment, watching the city come alive beneath the pale morning light. She felt different, not lighter, just steadier. Below, a familiar car pulled to the curb. Adrian stepped out, holding a brown paper bag. He looked up and smiled. "Breakfast?" She laughed. "You? Bringing food?" He grinned. "I'm learning." He handed her the bag. Inside, her favorite, pancakes with blueberry syrup, just the way her mother used to make them. For a moment, she couldn't speak. "How did you..." He said, "Your mother told me once, in that letter I never opened until you brought it back." She eyes softened. "You remembered." "I'm trying to," he said, "every day." They ate together on the stoop, laughing between bites. The rain had finally stopped. The city looked different that morning. Not shinier, not cleaner, just real. Like a place that had forgiven itself, too. Later that afternoon, Adrian received a call from his assistant. Sir, about the new community initiative you started, the one funding small businesses in the East End. Yes, we have our first applicant, a Miss Lena Hart. She's proposing a cafe literacy project. Adrian smiled, a deep, genuine smile. Approve it? Without reading it first? I already know the ending, he said quietly. It's going to change lives. That evening, he stopped by the diner one last time. The lights were dim, chairs stacked, but Lena was there, sitting at a table, sketching something in a notebook. Planning your empire? He teased. She looked up, smiling. Planning a beginning. He nodded toward the window, where the rain had started again, light and soft. Your mother once told me every storm brings something back. She was right. What do you think this storm brought us? Lena thought for a moment, then whispered, a bridge. Bridges aren't built in a day. They're built in quiet moments, in forgiveness, in showing up, and in learning to stay when it rains.
The grand opening wasn't grand at all. No press, no ribbon cutting, just a handful of people, friends, neighbors, and curious faces, gathered under soft fairy lights strung between two lampposts on a quiet corner of the East End. A small sign above the door read, Heart and Bean, Coffee, Books, Hope. Inside, the air smelled of roasted beans, paper, and possibility. Lena stood behind the counter, smoothing her apron and taking a moment to breathe it all in. Every inch of the cafe carried her mother's memory. The pastel walls, the reading nook lined with second-hand books, the framed photograph near the door of a smiling woman holding a little girl. Her mother. Her beginning. And now this, her continuation. Outside, the first rain of spring began to fall. Light. Cleansing. The kind that carried warmth instead of sorrow. Lena smiled. Of course it rains, she whispered. It always rains when something good happens. A soft chime rang as the door opened. Adrian stepped in quietly, umbrella in hand. He looked older in this light, not worn, but softened, like a man who had finally learned to breathe without a mask. He paused near the photo of Emily and young Lena, studying it with reverence. She'd be proud, he said gently. Lena turned. She'd tell you to stop hiding behind expensive umbrellas and come sit down. He chuckled. Then I'd better listen. He folded the umbrella and took a seat near the window, the same kind of corner he used to occupy in boardrooms. But this time, the weight in his shoulders wasn't power. It was peace. Customers came and went. Laughter, chatter, the occasional squeak of the old espresso machine. Lena moved between them with ease, her smile genuine now. Adrian watched, content just to be part of the scene, quietly, without spotlight. When the crowd thinned, Lena brought him a cup of coffee. On the house, she said. He looked up at her, a smile touching his lips. You know I can pay for it. I know, she replied, but this one's not for sale. He accepted it, not the coffee, but the gesture, the kind of forgiveness that didn't need to be spoken. As they sat in comfortable silence, Lena noticed a folder tucked under his arm. What's that? She asked. He hesitated, then slid it across the table. Something I've been working on. For us. She frowned, curious. Inside was a series of architectural renderings, a sleek glass and brick building labeled the Hart Foundation, Education and Opportunity Center. Lena blinked. What is this? An idea, Adrian said softly. A scholarship fund for single parents, working students, anyone who just needs one person to believe in them. She looked up. Adrian? He met her gaze. It's in her name.
Emily Hart, but it only happens if you want it to. Her throat tightened. You didn't have to do this. I know, he said. That's why it matters. For a long moment, she just stared at the papers, at the logo, the design, the quiet tribute to a woman who had carried both of them in different ways. Finally, she whispered, "She always said one day the rain would stop hurting." Adrian smiled, eyes misting. Maybe she was right. Outside, the rain had grown heavier, turning the street into a mirror of gold and silver reflections. Lena glanced toward the window. A mother and her little boy were running down the street, laughing as they ducked under a shared umbrella. She couldn't help but smile. I used to hate the rain. Why? He asked. Because it reminded me of every night she waited by the window for someone who never came. Adrian's expression softened. And now? She turned back to him. Now, it reminds me that sometimes people do come back, just in time. A sudden knock on the glass interrupted them. Jenna, her old co-worker from the diner, stood outside, waving. She hurried to the door and pulled her in, laughing. "You made it!" "Wouldn't miss it," Jenna grinned. "I still can't believe you own a cafe." "Believe it," Lena said, pouring her a cup. Her eyes flicked towards Adrian. "And is that him?" Lena smiled faintly. "Yeah, that's him." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "The billionaire?" "The man," Lena corrected. "Titles change. People don't always." Adrian smiled at that, a little humbled, a little grateful. Later that evening, when the last customer left and the lights dimmed, Lena walked Adrian to the door. He turned to her, hesitating. "You built this from nothing." She smiled. "Not nothing. I had her." "And now?" She looked at him, really looked at him. "Now, I have me." He nodded. "And maybe a father if you'll let me try." Lena's eyes glistened. "One step at a time." He smiled. "I'll take that." As he stepped outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. He looked up at the sign, Heart and Bean, glowing softly through the mist. For the first time in decades, he felt his mother's words again. Every storm brings something back. Weeks later, a photo appeared in the local paper. Lena cutting the ribbon at the grand opening of the Hart Foundation. Beside her stood Adrian. No headlines, no attention, just a quiet pride on his face. The kind of pride that doesn't need to be public. The caption read, "From lost connections to new beginnings, the Hart Foundation opens doors for those chasing second chances." One evening, Lena found a small envelope left on her cafe counter. Inside was a photograph, the same one of her mother and Adrian at the fairground, but this time a new photo was paper-clipped beside it. Her and Adrian standing outside the cafe, smiling beneath an umbrella. On the back, in Adrian's handwriting, "Before I knew her, after I met you." Lena smiled through tears. As the lights dimmed and the cafe grew quiet, she stepped outside, locking the door behind her. The rain had returned, soft, steady, endless. But this time, she didn't rush home. She stood under the awning, lifted her face to the sky, and let it fall against her skin. It didn't sting anymore. It felt like memory, like forgiveness made visible. A car slowed to a stop nearby. Adrian rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" She shook her head, smiling. "Not tonight. I think I'll walk." He nodded. "See you tomorrow?" She grinned. "You'd better." As his car drove off into the rain, Lena slipped her hands into her pockets and found the old photograph again, the one she once found in his wallet. She looked at it one last time, then folded it carefully and tucked it inside her own, right next to a new picture, her and Adrian under the same sky.
Some truths come too late for apologies, but just in time for healing. Because forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it rewrites what the ending could have been. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Between Raindrops Stories. And tell us in the comments, would you forgive someone who came back, not with excuses, but with love? Until next time, remember, sometimes the storm isn't the ending, it's the way home.